Hi, I'm Oliver Prezant, and I'm delighted that you're joining me for a preview of A Midsummer Night's Dream. It's the opera by Benjamin Britten with text by Shakespeare and direction by Nisha Jones. This play exists on three levels. It's the level of the fairy kingdom that Shakespeare describes so beautifully and in such detail. It's the level of the Athenian nobility with marriages in the offing between the Duke of Athens, Theseus, and his wife-to-be, Hippolyta, and then also the prospect of a marriage between Hermia and one of the two suitors who are vying for her affection. At the third level on which the play exists is the level of a bunch of hard-handed men. They are laborers, they are journeymen from Athens. They're a tailor and a carpenter, a tinker, a joiner, a bellows mender. All of these players are getting together and rehearsing a play in honor of the wedding of the Duke of Athens and his chosen bride, Hippolyta. Shakespeare calls them mechanicals, and Britten calls them rustics. Now, when you set text by Shakespeare as a composer, you are immediately challenged on several levels. Number one, it's just so beautiful that when you change the rhythm, when you change the quality of the declamation, when you add value with music, there's already so much music in the text that it becomes a special kind of challenge. That's number one. Number two, Shakespeare is wordy, and opera libretti typically leave lots of room for the music, because the music gives you all kinds of information. So that's challenge number two. Challenge number three is just the sheer length of time that it would take to set every word of a Shakespeare play. So choices have to be made. Now, on all of those counts, Benjamin Britten has taken this task very seriously. On the level of the fairies, there is a dispute. King Oberon is aware that Queen Titania has captured a little Indian child, an Indian child, and now she has the child that Oberon wants for his henchmen. And the two of them are on the outs with one another. Oberon is upset, and he intends to do something about that. On the human level, we know that Theseus and Hippolyta will be married. And there's a further complication in that a man named Aegeus does not want his daughter Hermia to marry Lysander, who has wooed her by moonlight. And on the level of the players, they are just struggling to get the words in and out of their heads. They are struggling to be the actors that they want to be, and yet they are not really equipped to take on the task. There's a lot of direct comedy at this level. Benjamin Britten is informed by the tradition of English music and by all of the compositional gestures, devices, and vocabularies that have been developed. We're at 1960 now. Britten has been composing opera for 15 years. Peter Grimes, Billy Budd, and operas that really look at the individual against society, the individual who may have trouble fitting in, the individual who stands outside of it all and who may be ostracized by the group. Britten is interested in such things. leave yourself open to a very inventive, very historically adept, very emotionally expressive, very individual and quirky composer who will characterize the struggles of the rustics with struggles that are musical, who will characterize the sameness of the lovers running in the forest with music that shows the twists and turns of love. How now, my love? Would you try that with me? How now, my love? And you see, this shape could come back the way it started, or back to the beginning from the end. It could go in retrograde, or it could be turned upside down. But this quality of twisting and turning, the agitated rhythms underneath the plaints of the lovers, the plight of the lovers, as Lysander and Hermia run into the forest, pursued by yet another lover of Hermia, Demetrius. He's the chosen one. He's the one her father wants, and he's pursuing her. And following hard upon is Helena, who loves Demetrius. And all of these lovers running through the forest, trying to find one another, escape from something. All of this is described by Britten with agitated rhythms and the twisting and turning melodic shapes that are the music that Britten adds underneath Shakespeare's poetic music. When it comes to the world of the fairy kingdom, Britten creates something that is truly unique. We're not talking about the world of the lovers, accompanied by the strings and the woodwinds and the brass, a typical orchestral accompaniment, with the singers, a high and a lower woman's voice and a high and a lower male voice, a typical vocal quartet. For the fairy world, Oberon is presented as a countertenor. The countertenor speaks and sings in his falsetto voice. That means the head voice, highly cultivated. And at the time Britten was writing this opera, there was a singer who had never sung in an opera before, and that was Alfred Deller. You can look him up online, Alfred Deller and the Deller Consort. This gentleman was so well versed in the performance of early music, music of the Renaissance, through the Baroque. And Britten was inspired to write in a sort of antique style for Oberon. So we have Oberon with an unusually high male voice. And Titania, now I must say also, Titania with a Y, and she is a coloratura soprano. Her flights of fancy, her laughing sounds, ha 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 ha. Would you try it? Ha 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 ha. Now look, that's me singing in my falsetto voice, imitating a coloratura soprano. Oberon will be singing in his falsetto voice, being the king of the fairies. The fairies themselves, Oberon's henchman is Puck. In this production, you'll see that Puck is going to be emerging, for example, out of a tree that is on stage, or spending a lot of time with hijinks that he is perpetrating throughout the opera, but he does not sing. There is a chorus, usually of a children's chorus of boys who are the fairies. These boys are referred to in a scene where Titania is talking to them and one of the players who's been enchanted is talking to them, and he refers to them as Monsieur or Monsieur in the French. He's trying to be formal with them and mispronouncing the word. And so Britten takes the opportunity to make them, to use a boys' choir here. And this boys' choir, in this case, again, due to health restrictions, we will be using Supernumeraries. Would you say supernumeraries, please, with me? Here we go. Supernumeraries. Those are people who are on stage and neither speak nor sing. They have parts and are placeholders in this production for the children who would be the fairy chorus. And you'll hear the voices of some of the female apprentices at the Santa Fe Opera performing in the register in the same range as the children. The orchestral instruments used for these fairies. Oberon is accompanied by the celeste. The fairy world is full of sounds and shimmer and lightness, and then percussion at the bottom, and perhaps the harpsichord as well. Britten is making interesting orchestral choices for this sound world. For the players, the sound world is something altogether different. One of the players is named Bottom. There's Snout, Snug, Peter Quince, Robin Starveling. Interesting names, even Francis Flute. But Bottom is, among the players, the person who takes up the most space, who gets the most attention, who draws the most attention. And you know what happens when a bottom holds forth, don't you? So Bottom and the players are largely accompanied by the trombone in its low register. Need I say more? Benjamin Britten is very interested in the world of the fairies and cuts much of the first act, in which we see the human level put forth, where we understand that the Duke of Athens and his chosen wife will get married, and that they're looking forward and they're telling time by the moon, the watery moon, the cold moon, evermore the moon in this play. And at the same time, a young woman, Hermia, wishes to marry her true love, Lysander, but her father objects and complains to the Duke that the ancient privilege of Athens will allow him to kill his daughter if she disobeys. And he has chosen a different husband for her, Demetrius, well positioned in society, as is Lysander. And there is yet another lover in the mix who loves Demetrius, poor Helena. Hermia is loved by two men, Lysander and Demetrius, and poor Helena is loved by no one. All four of these lovers rush into the woods, and it is the woods that Britten presents at the beginning of the opera. We are in the woods in deepening twilight. The woods themselves seem to breathe and sleep. So if we took the word sleep and back down, sleep. Try that. Sleep, sleep. And you can imagine the delight of the string players as they slide one finger up and down the fingerboard. And as we rise to the top, we hear a harmony that we arrive at. As we come back down, we rise to the top again and we arrive at a different harmony. And you know that the keys on the piano, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, creates the octave, and there are 7 pitches until you get back to C. If you add the 5 black notes, you get 12 pitches before you start to repeat. each time we arrive on a harmony, Britten gives us a kaleidoscopic tour. Each harmony is on one of those pitches within the spectrum that is presented within the octave. And so Britten is very interested in giving us a broad view of the sleeping, dozing, snoring forest. And it's the fairies who set the scene. It's the fairy chorus. It's Britten's boy choir. And these fairies sing this text: over hill, over dale, through bush, through briar. Would you repeat that with me? Over hill, over dale, through bush, through briar. Now, in the old spelling, and we've talked about the idea that Titania's name is different than the way it is sometimes spelled or pronounced. And the word through is presented as thorough. Now, you may know another song that goes over hill, over dale. And that's a particularly strong and measured way to present it. But if we round the words out, thorough bush, thorough briar, over hill, over dale, thorough bush, thorough briar. Try it. Over hill, over dale, thorough bush, thorough briar. Now we have a rounded, almost tumbling presentation of the text that defies expectations, along with the snoring and sleeping and breathing of the forest. The set that you will see with the black obsidian mirror at the back that may look like a black sun if you use your imagination, and the set that has a grand piano with a tree emerging from it, a tree that Oberon's henchman Puck will sit in. If you can imagine that this set will be permeable, that characters will enter and exit from the back, but that they may have other surprising entrances and exits, and all of this within the world of light and projection and shadow and design. You will see at the back a black round disc. And this black round disc refers to the obsidian mirror of John Dee, something that is an Aztec relic now in the British Museum. And John Dee, in the late 16th century, was a magus of sorts. He was a mathematician, someone who was well versed in the sciences, and at the same time interested in astrology, interested in the occult. And this obsidian mirror, which the Aztecs used to access and divine by conversing with or communicating with the Lord of Smoke, John Dee also used this mirror and this kind of approach in performances where angels purportedly spoke to the assembled audience. And he was not a laughingstock. Queen Elizabeth consulted him about opportunities in the New World, as well as on the most auspicious day for a ceremony of some significance. So for the Elizabethan audience, spirits, ghosts, the supernatural, fairies, the occult, is not something that is far from their experience. It's not something that is separated from science necessarily, and it's something that fits easily into the world, or the worlds in this case, that Shakespeare has created and that Benjamin Britten is setting. The most important part of the play and the most important part of the opera is how these worlds, how these levels are juxtaposed and how they intrude on one another. And it's largely through Oberon's intention to charm the heart of Titania and his incidental charming of the heart of one of the lovers who he sees suffering in the forest. He sees poor Helena chasing after her Demetrius, and he takes pity on her, and he tells Puck, go find the Athenian man and make sure that when the juice of a certain flower is squeezed on his eyes and he sleeps, that the next thing he sees, the next person he sees, is that woman who so loves him, so that he will love her in return. Act 1, on the whole, presents the world of the fairies, the world of the rustics, the mechanicals who will present the play, and also the world of the lovers. And in between the scenes that you will see, the woods breathe and sleep. That's Britain's way of separating and connecting everything in the first act. In the second act, you will see that a prelude presents 4 chords, each one hanging in the air like Mendelssohn's famous overture to this very play. Felix Mendelssohn, in the early 19th century, wrote incidental music to A Midsummer Night's Dream. And that is referenced in Britain's presentation of 4 harmonies, each with a different instrumental color. And these 4 harmonies become the basis for restless snippets of melody or qualities that might accompany a moment of a dream. So while there was a sense of slumbering in the first part of the opera, in the first act, now you will see in the second act the actual dreams becoming real, the actual blending of levels as Oberon and Puck work their magic and their mischief. An interlude in the middle separates the story of the lovers and the strange occurrence in the world of the rustics as Puck turns Bottom into a donkey. Bottom with the head of an ass, accompanied by the trombone, singing out of tune, saying that he has a good ear for music, and then betraying that with his every note. And as the fairy queen and the fairies dote on him, eventually they find their way into sleep. The lovers, separated initially by distance, are now tangled up together as the one who did not love Helena suddenly loves her, and the other one who loved Hermia suddenly loves Helena, and everybody loves Helena, and nobody loves Hermia. Everything is topsy-turvy, and the rivalry between the men becomes dangerous. And Oberon asks Puck to separate them and to put them as well to sleep. And there we have the ending of the second act. All the lovers are sleeping. We will move into the third act, where we will for the first time encounter the Athenian court. We will for the first time in this opera encounter Theseus and Hippolyta, who present lines from the very beginning of Shakespeare's play. and who talk about the moon and its cycles and how they are looking forward to their wedding and looking forward to the entertainment that is to come. And as the lovers have begun to wake and return to Athens, they are received by Theseus, who forgives them their changeability with respect to their hearts. And Demetrius, still enchanted, loves Helena. Lysander loves his true love, Hermia. And this union is blessed by Theseus. So at the end of the opera, we'll have a triple wedding. This is where a comedy should rightly end. But now we have the play within the play, or the opera within the opera. The players will awkwardly put on their play. It's the tragic tale of Pyramus, played by Bottom, and Thisbe, played by Flute. And in Britten's hands, the play within the play is an opera within the opera. And what was previously a British opera with indications in English, faster, slower, now we have those old Italian musical terms popping up, adagio, allegro, things like that. And we have the characters singing in a kind of a caricature of certain operatic gestures. As poor Pyramus, separated from Thisbe by a wall that is played by one of those hard-handed men of Athens. Pyramus and Thisbe, separated, agree to meet at an old tomb. And when Thisbe arrives, chased by a lion under the light of the moon, she drops her mantle, and her mantle, blood-stained, is found by Pyramus, who thinks she's died and kills himself. And when Thisbe comes back and sees poor Pyramus dead, she kills herself. And her death scene is so much a parody of perhaps the mad scene of Lucia at the end of Lucia di Lammermoor. Flute, who is playing the part of Thisbe, is accompanied by the flute. A little ditty of a flute melody that seems almost not to go with the seriousness of the scene. And ultimately, she sings scales that the flute imitates. And she dies with a kind of a burlesque show presentation that takes it to a whole new level. And now, with the play over, with the epilogue rejected by the audience that has been laughing and making light of the poor performance by these earnest players bantering among themselves, now it's midnight, the bell is tolling, and it's almost fairy time, says Theseus. And it's the fairies who take us out. It's the fairies who are first presented to us in Britten's opera. They are the bookends on a certain level. If you were to see an analyst's couch on stage, and if you had the opportunity to go inside the mind of our director, Nisha Jones, you might understand that she is considering the possibility that the royal road to the unconscious, as elaborated by Freud and Jung around the turn of the 20th century, that this exploration of dreams has something to say about how these levels might interact. You may see that. That may be part of the process of the play. I hope you have a wonderful time at the opera. And I hope when all is said and done, it is your beautiful, Midsummer Night's Dream at the Santa Fe Opera. Thanks for joining me.